The Orlando Magic, they beat the Atlanta Hawks last night pretty convincingly, and they will take on the Celtics in the first round. Now, this has not been the Magic's best year. Obviously, they lose Jaylen Suggs in the middle of the season. They're a 500 basketball team, a team that had so much promise last season, right? Taking Cleveland to 7 games, good young core. They still have a ton of promise, but this is a team that doesn't hold a candle to the Celtics, and that is what it should be in the first round, right? This team is not even close to the Celtics on paper. They're young. They're not very efficient offensively, and the Celtics should wipe the floor with them. Or should they? Because I've been watching a lot of Celtics basketball the last couple of years, and it's been very fun. It's been very good. They've won way more often than they've lost. But one of those teams they continue to slip up against a lot in the last few seasons is the Orlando Magic. In fact, the Magic look like the 96 Bulls sometimes when they're facing the Celtics, and that worries me a little bit. And again, this has been a success. I don't know if it's just a young team that really gets up when they're playing the Celtics, but the Magic have won 6 of the last 9 matchups against them in the last 3 seasons. And they've taken the season series this year 2-1. Now, context to that, Jason Tatum literally didn't play in the 2 games that the Magic beat the Celtics. And the last one they played, when Boston only scored 76 points in that game, they had like nobody playing. If I'm not mistaken, Tatum, Brown, Horford, Porzingis, and Holiday, maybe even Derek White as well. They were all out in that game. Like literally your whole rotation was out. That was the back-to-back after the overtime game against the Knicks with only a couple games remaining. Obviously, they said, we're not doing that. So you need some context involved there, but this is a scrappy team, young, scrappy team that doesn't really know any better. And it's almost a direct comparison for me to 2008 when the Celtics played the Hawks in the first round and the Hawks took them to 7 games and nobody on planet Earth saw that coming. You know, that was a team that was in their first postseason. Orlando kind of did that last year in their first postseason with taking Cleveland to 7 games. But, you know, that was a team that had a bunch of young guys. Al Horford, chief amongst them on the Hawks in 07-08, which is kind of crazy. But Josh Smith, former Celtic Joe Johnson, you know, they had a bunch of nice guys, right? Was Mike Bibby on that team? Am I getting that wrong? I think. Anyway, they just had a bunch of young guys and maybe Mike Bibby running around and making life hell for the Celtics, running them ragged. The Magic have a bunch of good young players, right? The Wagners and Paolo Banchero obviously is the big one. He's been hurt at times this year. Cole Anthony was the big spark plug off the bench last night in their biggest game of the season. He had 25 off the bench for them, filling in admirably for Jaylen Suggs in his absence. But they're not going to run you all over the floor. I'll say that. They're the slowest team in the NBA, actually. Slowest in pace. Right behind them is the Boston Celtics, if that counts for anything. But they've had, I mean, Banchero's a good enough shooter. Wagner's a good shooter as well, Franz Wagner. They've got some guys, but I just see this team, this Magic team, who can really get gritty with you defensively. They can bear down defensively. That's really been their calling card this year. But they don't have the firepower to keep up with the Celtics. I think in the NBA, when you come down to brass tacks, that's what it's got to be. And especially when you're the underdog, like you've got to have, when you're facing a team as stacked as the Celtics, you've got to have a couple of guys who can go off, right? When you look at the upsets that the Celtics have had or been at the hands of the last couple of years, it's been to Miami. And in 2020, it was Jimmy Butler and Tyler Hero had a great series. You know, in 2023, it was Jimmy Butler, of course. And then you had, Caleb Martin having games of his life. Max Strus doing the same thing. I just don't know that you have that kind of firepower for the Magic. Because in those Heat teams, Jimmy Butler was guaranteed to go off for you every night. He was going to give you 30. That was playoff Jimmy at playoff Jimmy's best. Paolo Banchero is a heck of a young player. He's not guaranteed to give you 30. Cole Anthony is not guaranteed to just crush you from the three-point line the way Caleb Martin would do, or Tyler Hero in that 2020 series. He's not a guarantee to do that. He might have a game or two like that. Don't get me wrong. Wagner, same thing. He's not going to give you 30 every night. And the Celtics will be rested. They will be healthy enough. I think Drew Holiday's still dealing with something that they're not really talking much about. Jaylen Brown is obviously not 100%. Porzingis can go down at any minute. But White, healthy, which he wasn't earlier in this year. Jason Tatum, healthy. Al Horford, healthy. Peyton Pritchard, much bigger role than he had even last year when he had a pretty damn good postseason. Sam Hauser does a lot for them defensively that he didn't do last year. Luke Cornett, I think they'll have some more trust playing in the postseason this year because he really didn't at all last year. So I just don't see Orlando having the firepower to keep up with the Celtics. But that said, the NBA regular season doesn't mean a lot for us as fans, but I think for the players, it does mean something. And when you've got a young, hungry team that has won 6 of the last 9 games against these Celtics, for the careers of most of these guys, the last 3 years. So that's basically the careers of Banchero and Wagner and Cole Anthony and Jalen Suggs, who's not playing. They're not afraid of the Celtics. That's the one thing that I think can play into Orlando's hands. They're not afraid of the Celtics at all. Like they're just the same way the Hawks were not when they faced the Celtics in 08. They're not intimidated by it. I don't know that Orlando is considered one of the great raucous arenas in the league, but neither is Atlanta. And in 08 in that series, it was a cauldron. Atlanta's not a great sports town. This is not great fans. Orlando, you could say the same thing, but maybe this is what they get behind. Maybe they do have the us against the world mentality. I think the Magic can push the Celtics a little bit because there will be a night, just like there was last year a couple of times in the postseason, right? Celtics lost 3 games in the playoffs last year. Each of those games, it was just one of those where every once in a while the Celtics cannot hit the broadside of a barn and they're going to attempt 63s and, they're going to make 20 of them. And bam, you lose a game by 15 points. I think the Celtics are still susceptible to that, even though they're playing their best basketball going into the postseason. I think they are still susceptible to that. But what the Celtics showed you last year and what they will probably show you again this year is that they are so good that a night like that just leads to 5-game series rather than being pushed to 7 or being knocked out. Orlando, to me, almost poses more of a concern than the Knicks do. The Knicks know they can't beat you in the second round. They know they can't beat you. In fact, they might be caught looking ahead playing the Pistons, who was a tough matchup for them, because they think, oh God, here come the big bad Celtics next. Cleveland has a bit of that FU attitude. They're not going to be intimidated. And that's going to be, I think, the first great test for the Celtics in the conference finals. In fact, that might be a bigger test than the NBA finals if by some miracle they get there and they don't play Oklahoma City. Like if they're playing anybody else in the West, even if it's Denver and Jokic or the Lakers, wouldn't that be fun? If it's anybody out West other than Oklahoma City, Cleveland's a tougher matchup. They just are. So Orlando, are you worried about them? Is this too much of a team playing with house money? A young team that doesn't know they're not supposed to win this series, and one that does still have a promising future. Like we're not talking about like that Atlanta team was like 7 games under 500 in 08. They didn't have much of a future after that. It took a couple of years for them to kind of get that core back to being a postseason team. But this Magic team were supposed to take a big step up this year. They had a bunch of injuries. They didn't. So the talent is there. They played in a 7-game series last year. They're not intimidated by your home building. Cleveland's a heck of a building as well, and they pushed it to 7 there last year. Of course, they didn't win any of the road games, but you know what I mean. They can push the Celtics. I really think so. They're not going to beat the Celtics, but they can push them a little bit. And maybe that's exactly what this team needs. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Do you give the Orlando Magic any chance? Because they have taken 2 of the 3 all-time playoff series against the Celtics. Dwight Howard's not walking through that door. Shaquille O'Neal is not walking through that door. And Jameer Nelson is not walking through that door. Anyway, let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Be sure to like the video. Subscribe to the channel. Only about 10% of you that are watching are actually subscribed to the channel. We're bringing you nothing but Boston sports content 5 days a week, folks. I'm Cam Stewart. Zach Burke's the producer that keeps us on the air. Check out the other videos on the channel. And be sure to check out the rest of the channel and find us here live on YouTube, high noon Eastern time every weekday, and then wherever you get your podcasts.